that is going to be recorded. You'll get a message.
As Kathy said, this will be recorded. And welcome to the Greater St. Louis chapter on a sunny day. We've had about 10 days of rain, so we're going to try to enjoy a sunny weekend here in St. Louis, and love seeing all these other people from different parts of the country. That is one of the blessings, we might say, because of the pandemic. I get to meet all of you from different locations. Our presenter, we've had her before a couple of times. Tina Childress, she's an audiologist and she has a hearing loss. She's pretty well known for her technology savvy, all about the apps that that you can translate to voice or to caption, so you can understand what people are saying. So today we asked her to talk about advocacy in the community. All of us has hearing loss, and it's really up to us to advocate for ourselves when we go in the community, because you know, we have an invisible disability, and people don't know what our needs are if we don't tell them. So without much ado, I'm going to hang it over to Tina.
Excuse me, can everyone see their captions? Are you all seeing your captions? If not, you need to activate it on your computer or on your iPad. You need to okay it, you know, it's under CC or live transcript. And it should say something to the effect of enable or something, activate. Okay.
Okay, Tina.
All right. So, hi, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces. And as Linda mentioned, and as Kathy mentioned, I'll be talking about advocacy today. So, whoops.
Your voice.
Am I, do you see the second slide that says a little bit about me, or is it stuck on advocacy?
It's on the first one still.
Okay, hang on a minute. I think when I was doing everything, turning stuff off and on.
Mine.
Sorry, hang on. This is weird. Hang on. I really do love technology, but for some reason it's not cooperating with me today. Yeah, my computer is acting weird. But a little bit about me. I'm just gonna fix all of this while I'm talking. So I am an audiologist by trade, and I am also a late deafened adult. And let me share my screen again. This is so weird. Okay, so now do you see the advocacy in the community slide? And
Yeah.
then how about me? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So I am an audiologist, but I tend to work with children clinically, but I have worked with many adults over my career, both as a mentor and as an advocate and as a resource. So I actually became an audiologist first before I lost my hearing. I currently have 2 cochlear implants. I got my first one in August of 2000. And I got my second one in December of 2005. It's amazing to me that it's been that long. You know, last year I could say one of my implants was legal to drink and also legal to drive. And now they're older than that. I am also a signer. So I love using ASL when I need to. And as Linda mentioned, I love all things technology related. My nickname is Techie Tina. If there is a gadget out there, I probably haven't. I've talked in the past about access to theater, and I'm going to very briefly talk about that again today for people that have not seen that presentation. But I grew up doing musical theater. My kid is now a theater major. I'm so excited. And, you know, I just think that we as a profession, as audiologists, we need to think beyond, you know, just the ears, right? And we need to think about ways that people enjoy their life. And that includes things like entertainment. That includes things like counseling. That includes things like knowing what your rights are. And so I hope this gives you a little bit of a taste of things like that. I'm going to be leaving some resources here for you to access later. And so for those of you that join later in the call, Kathy, if you could copy and paste the link to the handouts so that people don't feel like they have to write furiously in terms of notes. I did supply copies of these handouts for you. So the first thing that I think is most important, and this is something I talk about not only with consumers, but also with future audiologists and audiologists that I'm training, is that we need to have an elevator speech. And if we don't have an elevator speech, and if we can't articulate what our needs are, then someone is going to make the decision for us. And so I really encourage everybody to think about the different situations that they're in and what their elevator speech might look like. Can you say what you need? And so it's important to, you know, to tell someone, I need this accommodation, and to help them come up with solutions if it's not something that they currently offer. I think it's also very common, especially for people that have acquired hearing loss or lost their hearing later in life, that, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And that's why I think groups like HLAA, HLAA St. Louis, Cochlear Americas, Advanced Myonics, ALDA, you know, all of these support groups that are out there. If you're on social media and you like to follow like Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, there are so many places that you can go and you can say, hey, I have this situation. What have you used as a possible solution? And it's amazing and awesome to see the support from the deaf and hard of hearing community in those situations. So I highly recommend that you leverage those kinds of things. So as an example, I have these posters. Actually, I'm getting ready to hang these up in my office, but I love these posters. This is from a group out in the UK. It's called Action Deafness. And they have these really great posters. And one of the activities that we did for some of my students is they had to create their own posters. And so, you know, having visuals, I think, are very, very helpful for people. And so I'm looking forward to hanging these up in my office. So the first resource that I wanted to leave you with is, of course, the resources from HLAA. And I find that their list is very comprehensive on a variety of different topics. I really like the way that they have it laid out. So if you have problems with, for example, poor captioning on your television, you know, we know that more and more TV stations are going to automated captioning, and it has not been a good transition. There are many, many errors that can happen. as a result of using automated speech recognition for things like TV broadcasts. And so, we are talking about storms and bad weather. If they're using automated captioning, and that is our way of getting access to emergency information, and it's not sufficient, it's really important to know how to make a complaint or to let people know that it's not appropriate. As different rules get developed for things like over-the-counter hearing aids, things like accessibility on, platforms like the internet, there are constantly ways that, we need to voice and let people know if something is not working. Because if we do not say something, they're going to assume that everything is working just fine. And so, and for housing, if you are renting or buying, a house or an apartment or something like that, knowing what your rights are, are you entitled to be able to install visual doorbells? Are you allowed to have a service dog? Those kinds of things are laid out in the resources that you see on the page right now. And then another resource that I like to use is this one from NAD, or the National Association of the Deaf. And what I like about these letters is that it kind of, how do I say this? It kind of scares people. And the reason I say I like it because it scares people is because the language that's in these letters has all of the citations for the law. And so as I talk about ways that I have advocated for different things, I'll talk about the fact that sometimes people just kind of blow us off, or they ignore us, or they think that we don't know what we're talking about. But I guarantee that if you pull out one of these advocacy letters, it will make people jump, because they will realize that you know what you're talking about. And so I like that it has a bunch of different situations listed on here. So for example, I'll talk about cruise ships in a little bit. I'm going to talk about different scenarios, but I definitely reference these websites when I tell people about, like having to fight for accessibility, especially when they're getting a little bit of pushback. So I wanted to make sure that you had those two resources that you could look at later, do a deep dive. There's some really great information on there. Okay. So this is kind of my formula for requesting accommodations or accessibility for different situations. First, do not make it a yes/no question when you are phrasing it to them. Like, are you able to provide, XYZ? Because when you do that, you're giving them the opportunity to say no. And so I tend to just, say it as a statement. I am requesting XYZ. Please let me know what I need to do to make this happen. Okay. But if you phrase it as a yes/no question, like, is this available? Then you run into the risk of not knowing how they're going to answer. Okay. The other thing that I've learned to do is it's very, very important when you feel like you're going to be running into a wall, that you need to document any kind of communication that you're having with that venue. Because it's very easy for them to say, oh, we said, this and that. But if you don't have any proof to back it up, then they could very easily say, well, that person never asked for that. So, I come also from a slight legal background. I almost became an attorney. Can you believe that? And so I have learned over the years that documenting things, especially because we have hearing loss, right? When we call on a telephone, that possibility for misunderstanding what is being said on a telephone can happen. And so I do prefer, and I, say I do better over email. I want to make sure that I understand everything that you're saying. And it also leaves you a paper trail. So definitely document your communications. Especially, I think it's important to write down who you are talking to. Because when you write down, when you ask a person's name, you are holding them accountable. And so I always ask, and I try, I don't want to come off as being overly aggressive, but I usually say, what's your name, please? I would like to make sure that I know how to spell and say your name for future communications, right? Now, if you are still getting pushback, and this has happened to me several times, then it is within your right to go up the chain, wherever you're trying to get access. You have the right to ask for a supervisor. And again, document that name. You want to document why you had to go to the next level to go to the supervisor. Now, if you get to the supervisor level and you're still running against a brick wall, then it may be time to kind of bring out the big guns. And by big guns, that could be an advocacy group like HLAA. It could also be an attorney, and I'll talk about what a disability rights attorney might look like. And also, I want to say that if you have any questions, feel free to kind of jump in or let me know. So this is something I learned from a board that I was on. So, sometimes we play with our hair, we're drinking coffee, we're not really sure if someone is raising their hand. In my group, this is how we raise our hand. And then there is no doubt that I have a question. So if you have a question, feel free to jump in. Okay. So let's go to, like those big guns. So consulting with groups like HLAA, National Association of the Deaf, ALDA, perhaps there are some resources that we can provide you with. I have seen some of these advocacy groups also take to social media, right? They're going to call people out if people are not providing the access that they're supposed to. A great example of this is the advocacy efforts of Sherry Eberts from Living with Hearing Loss, when she was calling out Zoom for not providing captions in a very easy way. And so, that can have a big impact on people when you need to get stuff done. I see people so for example, when I travel, I tend to stay at Hilton properties. And sometimes, there are some complaints that I have. And I have seen people that have had similar complaints. And what they do is they get on Twitter or they get on Facebook. And this is not something I would do. I wouldn't do it for the purpose of shaming them, but I will use it to kind of call to attention something that needs to be fixed, right? And so social media can be very powerful that way. Okay, so second, going to an attorney. I know that people, sometimes accuse of Americans as being very litigious, that we want to go straight to sue. So here's the thing about discrimination when it comes to the ADA. If you need to have litigation against an entity for discrimination under the ADA, you are not entitled to things like compensation. Like you can't say, oh, they violated my rights because they didn't provide me captioning. I'm going to sue them for $1 million. That's not how it works with disability rights. You can take them to court for violation of the ADA, but usually the recourse is that they fix whatever they were not doing correctly. Okay, they will be, held responsible for paying perhaps attorney's fees and things like that, if that is built into the lawsuit. But people cannot simply sue entities for monetary compensation. So I wanted to be very upfront about that. When I have had to go to that next step after speaking to a supervisor, I tend to use John Waldo, who is the legal counsel for ALDA. He's also who Mary Stodden and I used when we brought the suit against Fox Theaters. He's just very knowledgeable. And he never goes straight to, I'm taking you to court. But what he'll do is he writes what's called a strong letter, where he basically says, I have this client, she would like this accommodation under the ADA section, blah, blah, blah. This is something that you're supposed to provide. And so sometimes bringing in that big gun is another way that can kind of promote action. And so on this slide, I also left a website for the Disability Rights Bar Association. And so these are all attorneys that are familiar with disability rights. They mentor each other, but they also will represent clients. And so this is a good place to start. Whoops. So let's talk about some scenarios right now. So I made up this word and I looked it up, and I think I really did make up this word. So I talk about being an advocate and how sometimes we even have to be an advocate when we're on vacation. So sometimes I call it advocation. So how many of you have had to be an advocate while on vacation? Right? You need to fight for something. Okay. So let's talk about cruise ships. Okay. How many of you have been on a cruise before? Okay. How many have asked for accommodations when they're on a cruise? Okay, Jacqueline has. Okay, in the chat box, if you don't mind typing in there, what kind of accommodations do you think you could ask for on a cruise ship? I'm going to try to make this a little bit interactive. I'm not seeing anything yet. Has anybody typed anything in? You have, Kathy?
I'm in the process.
Oh,
It's
you're in the
lengthy.
process. Okay.
Um,
If you would rather just speak it as well, that's fine. Just raise your hand so I know who's speaking.
I'll just go ahead and start real quickly. I wanted to let them know that I had hearing loss. So if there was any kind of an emergency, I wouldn't hear them. So next thing I know, there was a knock at the door, and I went, and there was this guy there from the ship with a wheelchair. I said, what's the wheelchair for? He said, well, we heard you were handicapped. And I said, no. Take the wheelchair back. I'm fine. I can walk. But see, they had no clue what to do with somebody with hearing loss. And so I thought, well, that's going to really be great. You know, if ever there's an emergency, my husband's not there, I don't have my cochlear implants in, how will I know about the emergency?
Wow. There was something definitely lost in translation. I mean, how many of you have had a wheelchair waiting for you when you got off the plane? Has anybody had that happen? I've had that happen. So any other possible accommodations you all can think of for a cruise ship?
Tina, it's me. I was thinking, there's these shows, and even though the speaker system is pretty good when they perform a show, and usually I get the gist of the show. But what if I wanted, say, Lupin or assisted listen devices? How would I let them know beforehand?
So I went on a cruise right before the pandemic. And actually my daughter got sick on the cruise and she got the flu, but we don't know now, looking in hindsight, if it was actually COVID. Anyway, so I was on this cruise and I went with my friend, who is the woman in the picture on the right, the one in the middle. She is also deaf, but she does not sign, and she has pretty limited benefit from her hearing aid. And so when we went to go book our cruise, and this is her 7th cruise, and she had never asked for accommodations before. And so I'm like, okay, let's book it. I'm going to ask for captioning. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, we have the right to ask for captioning. And so there's a form that you fill out on the cruise ship when you're making reservations. And one of the things that you can ask for is about accommodations. So I got a reply, and they were trying to offer me what? The very typical ASL interpreters or assistive listening devices. And I'm like, that's not what I asked for. My friend does not sign, so it's not going to benefit her to have an interpreter. She does not do well with her hearing aid, so an assistive listening device is not going to help her either. We want captioning. And it did go back and forth. It did go up the chain. And then I was searching on the internet. Someone had already brought litigation against this cruise line. So I pulled that case law. I'm like, you guys realize that you've violated the ADA before, and you're supposed to provide this. Well, after that, I got whatever I needed. And so here is an example of what captioning looks like on a cruise ship. So the captioner was fantastic. If any of you are going to ALDA in San Diego in October, she's probably going to be one of the captioners on site. She actually lives in San Diego, but she followed me and my friend. We were the only 2 people that had requested captioning, but I have to tell you, there were lots of people looking over our shoulders and asking to sit next to us so that they could see the captions. Okay, so I'm here to tell you that you can request captioning on a cruise ship. Now, if we had wanted to do an excursion where there was a big long tour, then the captioner actually has a machine like a harness, so she could have done walking captions. And so we ended up not using that. The picture on the right was actually us doing some shots. We were going to go tobogganing. I don't know if taking shots, I think that must have been after the toboggan, because that would not have been a good idea before the tobogganing. But she followed us around. And so if we needed any help, she was there. So the other thing, so Kathy, to your point about not being able to hear announcements, if you've never been on a cruise ship before, they usually have an app so that people can communicate with each other via like the ship's Wi-Fi. As an accommodation, they gave me free Wi-Fi so that I could communicate with the captioner via text to say, you know what, I don't want to go to the 7 o'clock show. Let's go to the piano bar instead, which is that bottom picture. She followed us to the piano bar to caption. And the reason we wanted to go to the piano bar is because my daughter got to be friends with the singer and actually was performing at the piano bar with the singer. And I had access to it because I had asked for captioning. Okay. I think when I think about, most of the people that are deaf or hard of hearing, I know that most people, when you say deaf, they're going to assume we want sign language interpreters. but there are a lot more people, I think, that would benefit from captioning. And it's so weird how people don't realize that. And when I talk about another scenario coming up, you'll see how that comes into play. So, you know, in addition to things like you can have an interpreter, you can have an assistive listening device, you can have captioning, you can have access to a Wi-Fi, you know, signal so that you can text back and forth as an accommodation. The other thing, in case you didn't know, on a cruise ship, they also have those ADA kits with the door knocker, with the vibrating alarm, kind of like what hotels do. Okay, so these are all accommodations that you could ask for on something like a cruise ship. Go ahead, Linda. I see your hand raised. Oh, you're on mute. Wait, I have to show you my mug.
Okay, sorry about that. A question came when you were talking. Some of these, like I'm going on a cruise in November. We're going to Amsterdam to Basel, Switzerland on the Rhine River. I don't mind sharing you the group Gate One Travel. I used them when I went to Greece and they were wonderful. So my question to you is, I don't think Gate One Travel, this is my question. If they're not a USA cruise line, but say British or Norway, or how does that impact ADA?
That's a really great question. And my understanding is that if you are traveling someplace that is not within the US, then they do not have to follow US rules.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't hurt to ask.
No,
right?
yeah.
And there are different rules in Europe and in Asia. And what I would suggest is, you know, having that conversation with the travel agent and the cruise line to see, you know, what's available. Because they would not be, well, I'm not sure about this, but also if you have a service animal, I don't know how that would also be impacted if you go abroad. Because the rules here in the US could be very different abroad.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really, really great point. I haven't thought about that. But I know that, you know, when COVID happened, there were a lot of cruise lines that could not come into the US because they were not US based. So there was a lot of controversy with that. Okay. So anyway, here to tell you, you can get captioning on a cruise boat. Okay. So now I wanted to talk about telehealth or going to, you know, a hospital or a clinic. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and answer this question for you. So a lot of the accommodations that I was talking about for that cruise line are also the same kind of accommodations that you could also use for healthcare. Now, again, the same question that, you know, a lot of hospitals don't realize that they would have to provide captioning or CART if that is something that you requested. Okay. And so one of the things about being a person with a disability, I'm sure you all can kind of commiserate, is we usually have to do some legwork or some prep before we go into a situation. I know that before I'm going to request tickets for a show, or if I'm going to go someplace where I need accessibility, I'm going to start that preparation as soon as I can, because it's not fair to do something last minute. They can't create accommodations or accessibility out of thin air. So giving them as much lead time is another way that you can ensure that you're going to get the accommodation that you need. So with masks, I know that, you know, masks are kind of coming and going, But I believe that masks are going to be around to stay, even if it's just very few people, for the people that are very vulnerable. I think we're going to see it persist in healthcare settings, as long as we know that, that the virus is still kind of being transmitted. And as people with hearing loss, we recognize that it makes communication a lot more difficult, right? Sounds are quieter. Sounds are more muffled because the masks actually take away the power of the high frequencies, which is where you find consonant sounds. So that's why you can hear people talking, but you can't understand what they're saying, right? And then also, of course, the loss of visual cues. And so all of these things are ways that masks have impacted communication. And what I recommend to my friends who are professionals and also to consumers is that there is no one mask that is going to fit all people that are deaf or hard of hearing. Okay. For people that are more auditory or that they use their listening to communicate, if you are wearing a mask that's like a paper mask, it's going to let most of the sound come through, but it's going to obscure the lip reading cues. On the other end of the spectrum, if you are a signer and maybe you don't rely on listening at all, something like a face shield, if it's allowed, or a mask with a clear window may provide you with the lip reading cues, the facial expressions that you need. And so what I tell my colleagues is that you want to have at least 2 masks available. One that's paper for the people that are auditory, and one that has some kind of clear window for people that need lip reading cues, because there's not one mask that works for everybody. Now, the mask on the right, which is that says not recommended for use with remote microphones, this is a mask that I've seen be quite popular in different settings. And it is just one big piece of plastic, but there's 2 foam pieces, one at the nose and one at the chin. Now, the reason that we don't recommend it for people that use microphones, so if you're using a mini mic 2, or if you're using, like anything like a Roger system, is that piece that, so if I'm the talker and I'm wearing the microphone and I'm wearing that mask, that bottom piece of foam is totally going to suck the power out of that microphone. My voice is not going to reach it sufficiently. So that is not a style of microphone that we would recommend if someone is using a remote microphone. And here is just an example of the different microphone options that are out there. These microphones can be given to the person that you're talking to. Things like the Roger pen, which is the silver wand looking thing, or the Roger On, which is the mic in the top left-hand corner. Those are microphones that can be pointed. And so if you're, really struggling to hear in a listening situation with people behind masks, those are things that can help. On the right, we have things like the Mini Mic 2 Plus. We have the Audio Link for people that use Med-El. The EduMic are for people that use Oticon devices. We use those in the schools. So my point is that there are microphones that you can give to people or that you can point to people to hear better with masks. So here are some of my favorite speech to text apps that I use in different settings. So in the upper left-hand corner is just my 2 favorite apps for speech to text. I have an Android device, and so I tend to use Live Transcribe. For people that use Apple devices, I know many people like Otter. The thing about Otter is that it also records the conversation. It was not designed to be an accessibility tool. It was actually designed for reporters, for people that do interviews. And so, but it just got really good at speech recognition, which is why many people use it on their phone. Okay. Another app that's out there is called Ava. And Ava, you can use it one-on-one, but you can also use it in a group setting. And that's the same with Microsoft Translator, which you see in the bottom. And so with both Ava and Microsoft Translator, let's say I'm going to a restaurant and there are 3 other people in my group. The other 3 people will have their cell phone, will download the app, will join the conversation. And then when they want to communicate, they talk into their phone and I see the output on my phone, and it can kind of go back and forth. And so Ava and Microsoft Translator both work kind of that way, which is nice. And then also Google Translate and Microsoft Translator, if you can use the app where you speak in one language and the output is in a different language. So I've used that in a pinch in certain situations where I can't understand somebody. Okay. In the upper right-hand corner is an app called Web Captioner. So let's say that you're on your computer and you need to watch something that's not captioned. You can go to the webcaptioner.com website and it will caption what you're listening to. If you are using a Chrome browser on a computer only, not on a tablet, not on a phone, if you're on Chrome on a computer, there is what's called an add-on called Live Caption. Has anyone here ever used Live Caption on Chrome? Okay. I mean, I could do this a whole other talk on stuff like this, but Live Caption is really great because it will caption any media that's on your computer. So for example, sometimes I don't even realize there's media playing until Live Caption pops up. I'll click on something, maybe I'm shopping for shoes, and I don't realize there's a video on there that's playing sound, and then Live Caption will caption that. So it's pretty cool. The picture in the bottom right is a picture of my phone with a little microphone on top. It's called a shotgun microphone. And so if I'm in a situation, for example, the grocery store, and I'm trying to understand the cashier that's behind a big plastic shield, and there's a little bit of noise, that microphone can kind of focus a little bit more on what I want to listen to. And so that's just one way to kind of help the signal. Okay. So, these are all things that you can use in a doctor's appointment for short conversations. Now, if you are going into the doctor and you need to have a medical procedure done, or you need to talk about a new diagnosis, and this counts whether it's for you or if you are a caregiver for someone, but you are like that power of attorney, if having absolute accuracy is the most important, especially for something that's very complicated, please do ask for a live person, for a live captioner. Because when you need to rely on accuracy, having a live cart captioner is going to be better than any of these apps that you see on here. Okay. If I needed to rely completely on what I see in the text, I'm gonna request a captioner. But if I'm just having a hard time understanding something at a checkup, then I'm okay with using this. Okay. So if you want to go low tech, of course, there's paper and pen. How many of you remember those tablets that you would draw on and then you would pull up that film and it would erase it? Like maybe your kids or your grandkids use that. Well, the high-tech version of this is called an LCD writing tablet. The same idea where you write on it, and to erase it, you just press the button at the bottom. But some people would rather have something simple like that versus like an app on their phone or something like that. The scribe pad, which is on the right, This is actually something that nurses use when they're writing down vital signs, when they're doing rounds. All it is, it's like a little mini whiteboard with a dry erase pen. So if you don't have pen and paper on you, or your phone, this is something that people will like to use also. All right. So when it comes to your healthcare provider, I think it's important to consider some of these things before you arrive. How accessible is our office for contacting them? Do they require that you only call them? That's not very deaf or hard of hearing friendly, right? Again, if you are going to request captioning, you're going to want to do that way ahead of time, especially if this is the first time that you are making this request. And I put it in bold, big letters highlighted, because I cannot stress this enough. Accommodations are not just sign language interpreters. Okay, especially for those of us that can benefit from captioning. And then, do they have a variety of masks available? Now, I know, many of my peers that are deaf or hard of hearing, they buy the masks and they distribute them to their healthcare providers. And all I can think of, that's not the way it's supposed to work. The healthcare providers are supposed to be the ones that supply themselves with the different masks. I would be okay with showing them a mask, but I'm not going to give them a mask that I purchased. That's just me. Okay. The waiting area. How many of you have ever gone to the doctor's office and the person at the front desk is behind a big computer or a big sheet of glass and you can't even see their face? Right? Those are situations where you might want to have a conversation with someone that it's not conducive to communication for people that are deaf or hard of hearing. If they have any media or if they're playing TV, then making sure that the captions are turned on. And then, I don't know about you, but I am that person that sits on the edge of their chair because I'm waiting for someone to call my name, to be called in next. One of the clinics that I go to did change their system where they have initials that are on a monitor, which makes me feel a little bit more calm so that I know if it's going to be my turn soon. And then especially for places like an audiology office, having a waiting area, and if you could loop the waiting area, what a great opportunity to demonstrate assistive listening devices and things like that. Other things to consider, is the lighting good? I think about older people, and I know this for sure with my own vision, that if it's dark, it's harder to communicate. We want to make sure that there's good lighting, that it's not too echoey, so the acoustical treatment is good. And this is something also that I want to make sure, especially that audiologists are aware of. Making sure that when you are specifically working with people that are deaf or hard of hearing, that you have accessible communication, whether that's visual cues, if that person is a lip reader, or captioning, or having an ASL interpreter. I think it's on the next slide. The other thing that I think it's important, and you have the right to ask for this, is after your appointment, you have the right to ask for things to be printed out for you. So I always ask for, like if I'm getting my cochlear implant adjusted, I ask for a copy of what they call the programming page. And so what it has is it has the name of my device. Like how many of you can say, I have an Advanced Bionics Q90, or I have a Phonak M50 SP. Okay. And so it's important that you know the make and model of your own device. So that's on there, the serial number. And then also things like, okay, I have 5 programs on my device. What's on each of the 5 programs? Okay, so that kind of stuff would be listed on the programming page, and that's something that you should ask for. And just in general, I know that doctors are pretty good about this lately, having some kind of summary of the appointment, because we cannot 100% rely on our hearing. Any kind of recommendations that they have, you want that printed out, information about future appointments, as well as, when we're talking about payment, financial information, how are we going to pay for things? When it comes to telehealth also, how many of you did telehealth during the pandemic? So Kathy, when you were talking with your provider, was there captioning available on the platform that you were using?
I don't know. I did not ask for it, to be honest, because I was able, because it was face to face. And actually I could hear her better on the computer than in person. She didn't have to wear her mask, because when I go into the office, she has two masks on, not just one.
Right.
So it was easier for me. I almost preferred being on the computer talking to her than in the office for that reason. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, there are definitely benefits to Zoom meetings, having the captioning, face-to-face, no masks, one person talking at a time, all of those things. So, but here's the thing, I know this is something that not all platforms have. What if you can't do as well as Kathy does with her cochlear implants, and you're really struggling to hear? And so it's, important to ask, does your platform have captioning? And if it doesn't, then they need to help you come up with a plan B so that it's accessible for you. So here's a thing about teleaudiology that always gets my goat. So we as audiologists doing teleaudiology, we might say something like, okay, I hear that you're telling me that, your hearing aid's not working. Let's check your ear mold and your tubing. I'll make sure there's no holes or cracks. So then the patient takes off their hearing aid and is showing it in front of the computer, but the audiologist keeps talking. But the patient just took out their hearing aid, And so that's another situation where you want to make sure that it's accessible. Okay. If you have any kind of streamer or, external speakers to kind of boost up the volume, definitely you're going to want to use that. So I don't know if you noticed, but I'm using a microphone right now. And this microphone, I'm using a wired one because I realized my Bluetooth one was not charged. But so my voice should be coming across pretty well because my voice is this far away from the microphone. If I were going to be using the microphone on my computer, this is what it would sound like. So I'm going to put my voice this far away, and it just doesn't sound as good, right? And so for people that are deaf or hard of hearing, asking that people use some kind of external microphone, especially for Zoom calls, is really important. This is what my Bluetooth microphone looks like that I normally wear. It's about the size of my pinky. And if you want to know what brand this is, I can tell you about that later. But I just wanted to let you know that, those are things that you can ask for. So I know that we're running out of time. Kathy, what time do you want me to stop? Kathy and Linda.
2:30, right, Linda? 2:30. Yeah, just allow yourself time to answer questions too, though.
Yes.
So maybe 2:15. That way you have time for questions or something like that.
Sure.
Okay.
This is the last scenario, so that's good.
Yeah, don't want you to miss that. I don't want you to cut out anything that's important. That's for sure.
Okay, I think it's all important, right?
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. Okay, so now this is theater, and this could be live theater, or this could be like a movie theater. So I'm just going to talk this through. So when we talk about options for theater, kind of a lot of the same things that we've talked about: captioning, ASL interpreters, assistive listening devices, which is also known as hearing assistive technology. Now, this is something also that I have used for the smaller theaters. So I don't know how you all feel about this, but I know that I have the right to ask people to pay for like a live captioner. But I also am cognizant of things like theaters, like not having a very big budget. And so whenever I can, I try to help them out. And so there are times when instead of requesting captioning for just like a small independent theater, I say, hey, can you just give me a PDF of the script? And so I get the PDF of the script and I put it on my phone. And then I don't know if you know this, like if you're in Adobe or something like that, they have something called dark mode so that the background is black and the text is white. And then I turn down the brightness and then I can read the script while the action is going. Yeah, I have to scroll manually. Sometimes I have to go back and forth between pages, but I'm able to have access that way. And so is it the perfect solution? No. But it's something that I'm willing to kind of tolerate just for the sake of theater. Okay. But we do have the right to ask for official captioning as well. The other thing that some people can request is preferential seating. So I know this is especially the case for people that are blind or have low vision, that they can sit close to the stage. And so if you need to be able to lip read someone, or if you think you're going to be able to hear better, if you sit closer, you also have the right to ask to sit closer. Now, not every venue treats that preferential seating in the same way. And when I say that, I mean in terms of cost. And I'll talk about that in a second. So here on the right is the article talking about, it's so funny, they said Illinois women, but it wasn't just me. You guys realize that HLAA St. Louis and Mary Stodden was also a part of this lawsuit against the Fox Theater. Okay. So I call this a tale of three cities. So I have had the fortune and opportunity to experience theater in a bunch of different venues. So this is the way that the Fox Theater does it in St. Louis. And a lot of this is as a result of that lawsuit. So you can have open captioning. You have to request it way ahead of time. Or an open caption means that there's some kind of reader board that everyone will be able to see. Or you can have closed captioning, which is on a handheld tablet. But the way that they ask for it is that they need at least 2 weeks notice. And that was part of the lawsuit, because one of the things they tried to force us to do was to only come to this one performance. And we argued that hearing people aren't forced to only go to one performance. They have options. And so if we give them notice, then we should have the right to attend a performance that matches our schedule. Okay. The other thing that Fox was required to do was to publicize that they had accommodations available and to provide the information on how to contact Fox Theater to request an accommodation. And also that it wasn't just a phone call, that they could email the Fox Theater was another kind of request. Now, when I say cost is the same as other patrons, that means that if I want to sit in the nosebleed section, I'm going to be charged the same amount of money as someone in the nosebleed section. If I want to sit up close because I want to be able to see the action, then I'm going to have to pay for it as if it's premium seats. Okay. Now, that's St. Louis and the Fox Theater specifically. Chicago. So Chicago, in my mind, is kind of the gold standard for accessibility. And let me tell you why. So if I want to see a show in Chicago, and this is specifically with the Broadway in Chicago series. Hang on, I have to cough. They have on their website multiple dates for open caption showing, ASL interpreted shows, and shows that have audio description for people that are blind, low vision. It's a long time to talk.
You're muted. You're still muted, Tina.
Tina, can you hear us? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, now she's good. Oh, nope, now you're muted again. You're good now. You're good.
Okay, so the thing also about these shows, if you can't go on a date that they have provided on their website, you can request another date. And I love that it's open caption because I don't have to hold anything. Now, here's what sets apart Broadway in Chicago. They only charge us the cheapest seats in the house.
Wow.
And we sit in like the first 20 rows, orchestra right. The seats are amazing. This is why I saw Hamilton 7 times. And each time I went, I brought a different group of people. So if you have the opportunity to experience theater in Chicago, I highly recommend it. Go ahead, Linda.
I agree, Tina. Mary Stodden and I and a group of us went to Chicago to see Hamilton. It was before COVID, so I'm thinking it was 2018, maybe 2019, but we took a train to Chicago and I saw Hamilton, and oh, it was wonderful, wonderful. I mean, it was so wonderful. You could see them throwing spit in the air when they were talking, but the captioner was just wonderful. I would have never understand Hamilton without that caption. So yes, thank you, Chicago. Thank you, Tina.
But
Yeah,
you know
no
what was so
problem.
interesting about Chicago? They had the open caption bar. It was off to the side, and you sat near that open caption bar, and you were able to see it, but you were still in line of sight of the action on the stage. And I thought, you know, that couldn't. I mean, the real expense was the paying the captioner, because she was coming from Denver. We talked to her. She would fly in from Denver to do the captioning for Hamilton, then she'd fly back. I mean, at least the one we had. And that may
Usually,
not be true every show, but I thought, wow, but that bar couldn't have cost that much. And when I think of all the tablets that they hand out at the Fox that you have to hold in your lap or your hand to read the captioning, I just thought that bar was just so easy. It just seemed like it cost surely less than all those tablets. I don't know.
so on the screen right now, you should see Hamilton and what the open caption looks like. That's how close we are to the stage.
Right.
And
Yes.
then the captioning is right there. On the left is the device that they provided me at the Fox Theater. Look how small that text is.
Yes.
And when the lights go down, those white bars are really bright. Like, I feel like Fox Theater didn't know what they were doing. Okay, so I'm going to go back a slide. So I also want to talk about Broadway in New York. So John Waldo and I were actually involved with kind of like a Broadway accessibility advisory group. And so what they have in New York is they have some open caption performances, but it's pretty limited. And that's through TDF, the Theater Development Fund. Or the thing that John and I were involved with is they have closed captioning available at all of the Broadway League theaters from any seat for any performance. Okay, so that, and I'll show you what that looks like, and it is something that's handheld, but I'll show you how that works. And again, the cost is the same. If you want premium seats on Broadway, you're going to have to pay for premium seats on Broadway. For the open caption performances through TDF, there is a little bit of a discount, but those tickets go so quickly. So here are some pictures again of what it looks like. So upper left is they give you a tablet at the Fox Theater. Bottom is Chicago, where they have open captioning with that LED reader board. And on the right, so that's John Waldo, in case you don't know what he looks like. So in New York, they have two options. What I'm holding in my left hand is something called an iCaption device. And all it is, it's a way to show captions. Okay. But what I'm holding in my right hand on a selfie stick, so I didn't have to hold my phone for 2.5 hours. And what John Waldo is holding in his hand, we're both holding our cell phones. And there's an app called GalaPro. And that is what is displaying the captions. And so all three of these cities have different ways that they approach accessibility. And like I said, my favorite is the way Chicago does it. So when it comes to movie theaters, there is the option of having open captions now. How many of you have seen a movie with open captions at a movie theater? And there has been a significant push for more open caption showings to happen. AMC movie theater has kind of been leading the charge against on this. And I find it rather funny and ironic, because when John Waldo was working with the different advocacy groups to get captioning to happen in the movie theaters way back when, it was AMC that was kind of pushing back the most. And now they're the ones saying we're offering more of these open caption performances or movies. So if you are on Facebook, there is a Facebook page called Missouri Illinois Caption Drive-In, and I don't know why I can't type this. I'm typing to Pam. It's GalaPro, GALAPRO. Anyway, so that Facebook group, if you want to see a movie that's open caption, they will list local theaters, especially in the St. Louis area, that have open captions. Apparently there's a drive-in movie theater near you also, where you can also watch an open caption movie. And then of course we know, and so that's open caption, you know, that's what everyone sees. It's not available for all performances, but it is, you know, much nicer and easier to watch. And then of course we have the closed caption devices. Bottom right is Captiview. How many of you have used Captiview at a movie theater? And we kind of have to wrestle with it a little bit.
Yeah,
Has anyone ever used the glasses? I hate the glasses.
a couple of times. I don't like them either.
Yeah, they're kind of heavy, and I already have glasses and I have these implants and there's no more room. They don't feel sanitary. Like I doubt that they're washing them. And so, you know, those are the options that we have in movie theaters. And I guess I put up this scenario because I just did want to let you know that because of movies like Coda, how many of you have seen the movie Coda? So it was the one that won all of those Academy Awards with Marlee Matlin and Troy Kotsur. But, you know, they vowed when they did that movie and released it in the theaters that all of the performances would be with open captions. And it just kind of made everything a lot more visible. And, you know, a lot of these open caption kind of initiatives happened before that movie came out, but I feel like we're just seeing it more and more. So want to let you know that that's happening. And I know that there are some deaf and hard of hearing advocacy groups that are also really pushing for more open caption kind of performances. So I am going to leave you with some resources. So, you guys know that I love to create lists. And so this is where you find the list of my lists, because I have several. And so you can take a picture of the QR code, or you can go to the website that's on there. And again, this is all going to be in your handouts. And when you go there, this is what the list looks like. So you'll see anything that I developed about apps, about different options for speech to text, things like that. That's where I put all of my resources so that you can access them. And so with that, I am done with the presentation, but I am available to take questions. So I'm glad that we had a little bit of time.
That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. While it's in my head, your list of resources, do I have your permission to put that on the website, our website?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So you got any questions? Please use your chat room or do raise your hands if you have a question for Tina.
I just read the rest of the message from Pam. So Pam, that app only works in live theater and only on Broadway. So it does not work in movie theaters. But the movie theaters should have things like a like a captive view or the glasses or something like that. There are also apps that also can display captioning. It's a little bit more complicated. Are you talking about a local movie theater that doesn't provide any kind of captioning? Because that's actually illegal at this point, because all of the movie theaters were supposed to transition to providing some kind of access.
No, I actually was trying to figure out a very streamlined approach to, entertainment. And I thought, well, if there's one app that'll work in all settings, then that was the reason for asking the question that I did.
I see what you're saying. And, there is value in some of these speech to text apps, but they're not going to be perfect. Especially in a venue where there's like music playing, or if there's a lot of echo or something like that, but there is no one app that works across settings, kind of what you're talking about. That would be great though, wouldn't it?
Well, then you'd have more expertise because you'd be using the same app every time. And that was sort of my thinking.
That really does make sense.
Excuse me, Kathy, stop the recording because I think it's impacting my